last time you saw us completely reassemble the front suspension. So now the time is to put it back in the car. A couple things have happened off camera. I'll go over them here real quick. All I've really done is kind of trim out and undercoat the inside right here just to make it look a little bit nicer. And then I installed our upper control arms for PST. Now these are tubular and they're stronger and stiffer over the factory stamped steel control arms. So that's what we're going to go with. So we've got those just sitting in there kind of loose, just a little snug, so that way we can pivot the control arm up and down without messing up our bushings. And next we'll actually take and put the entire cross member back in. So the disc brake spindle assembly is really not all that complicated. Whenever you're going through brakes like this, it's really important that you change out your bearings, your inner and outer, and they're really not expensive. They're like $2 or $3 a piece. It's well worth it, and these are Timken brands, so they're really good. I got all this from Rock Auto. This is from Power Stop, and you get your Dorman dust caps. This is a washer that goes on the spindle, and then this is the little lock nut that keeps the nut from backing out, and then our inner bearing, outer bearing, and this dust shield. So the dust shield will go on after you install your bearing on the inner side. So the best thing to do whenever you're redoing brakes, if you were to reuse the calipers and resurface them, then it's a very good idea to go ahead and get a new race. Now the thing about this thing, since I bought new calipers, I'm not going to have to do that. So what you do is you drop that sucker in there like that, and then our dust shield, I'll just tap that in there the way it sits, but we need to pack it full of grease first, so I just wanted to show you. Then whenever we actually install this onto the spindle, it'll be kind of like this. Be careful not to scratch my rotor. On the front side, again, there's a race, but we don't need it because we already have good ones and new ones installed. Then that one pops in like that, followed by a washer, and then the lock nut like that. and I'll show you again when I install it on the car, but I just wanted to kind of go over how simple this stuff is, and honestly how important these two pieces are right here, because they can freeze up, get rusted, and you can see how smoothly this here rolls. If you ever get one that's stuck, then it's always a good idea just to replace these while you're here. They're inexpensive, pack it full of grease, get a new dust shield. I can reuse these parts, and you honestly can reuse the dust cap, but I wanted it to look nice. These are from the car. You can actually buy these new. They're not expensive either, but it's well worth it just to replace these two items.
Alright, here's the moment of truth. Let's see if this thing will actually hold itself up. So I think what the issue is that I turned up the torsion bars a little bit too high. I actually set it to where it should be if it has an engine in it, or they're about pretty close. So now I think what's happening is that the suspension can't travel, which it's not going to matter because it has no weight in it right now, but I might just set it down just so we can kind of get an idea of what the ride height would be like. But other than that, let's take a look at the car. We got our torsion bars turned up just a little bit too high, but you get the idea. And that looks really good. Sorry about the shadows, but it's nice to have the car rolling again. It's been, I guess, a little over a month now this car's been sitting over in that nice spot right there. Finally, got the car back sitting on all fours, rolling around. And this is not the final wheel and tire selection. This is just what I put on it to make it roll. So I think what we need to do now is tear this engine apart that we've been talking about. The original 318 that came out of this car. So if you remember from part 1 and part 2, we tried to get this engine to run, tried to unstick it, but it never did, so I eventually ended up pulling it, and now I had it apart. I actually redid the front suspension, which is what you saw me just put back in.
So now what we want to assess is why this 318 would not run. My guess is that it's not a valve that's stuck. Typically when you have a valve that's stuck, you can kind of work it loose, but you can feel where it starts and where it stops whenever you're moving the crank pulley. This one will not budge whatsoever. My guess is beyond a stuck ring. I don't believe it's just a stuck ring. I'm starting to think that it might be the bottom end has been frozen solid. Whenever I got this car, you might not be able to see it because it's dark, but the oil pan was damp. I mean, it was soaked. So I'm starting to wonder if maybe sitting on the ground where it was really muddy, it was really damp, and it probably stayed that way for all of the 35 years it sat there. Wondering if it was able to creep up into the engine and actually stick it. So I don't know, but we'll find out. First things first, let's get all these front accessories off. I do need to keep up with these because at least the brackets and the pulleys will be going back on the Challenger. Alternator loose. We'll pop the intake off first. That'll be the easiest way. So just a little recap in case you haven't watched part 1. What I did was let this thing sit for, I'd say, over a month with transmission fluid and Marvel Mystery Oil in each cylinder, and I let them soak. I really let them soak for a long time because I had no idea what was going to happen with the engine, and it really wasn't any help, fortunately. So what I decided to do was actually pull it out. So before you say that I didn't do everything that I could have, I mean, I really tried. I honestly did what I thought I could do to make this thing run. Even if we were able to make it run, it still had to come apart and be fixed, because an engine that's stuck this bad really has to have some kind of corrosion or pitting going on in the cylinder wall if it were to come unstuck and run. So I wouldn't really have a lot of faith in the engine. And if you haven't watched the other parts as well, we've got a 40 over 360 with Keith Black hyper-eutectic pistons sitting on the engine stand over there, and that's why this thing is not on a stand. It's just sitting on a tire because that's what I got. I only have one engine stand, and this will do the trick. So we'll finish taking off these intake bolts, pop it loose, and I just wanted to, you know, make sure that you guys know that I really did try to make this thing run. I didn't just pull it just to pull it, because it is the original engine, and if we could have made it run, I would have rather kept it. Honestly, I would have kept it in the car if it ran, and that just wasn't the case. And some people said that it could have been the belt. I pulled the belt off, nothing had stuck, and I still tried to turn it over with the belt off of it. Still would not turn. It's just as bad. So it is literally locked up tight. Pretty simple. Yeah, I see some RTV here. Looks like somebody's had the intake off before. Wow. Cam is worn. Looks like they ran it with oil at some point, but it honestly doesn't look bad. I mean, it would have ran at least, or it should have at least turned. And we got some really heat stress cracks right here on this lobe. So probably ran low on oil at one point, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't have ran. So this valve cover I've already pulled. I know it's clean. So far, just based on what I've seen here, the engine should have ran. That's what makes me think it's the bottom end. Same story. Looks brand new over here. But it reeks of gas. So, honestly, these lockers, they look brand new. A little pro tip when dealing with these Chrysler rocker arms. It's best, work your way out. Don't loosen them up all the way out one at a time. Work your way around That way that the pressure is taken off evenly. Because if you do that, say you were to loosen up all these and you had one left, more than likely you can break a rocker shaft. I actually had one on my truck break because somebody looked like they had tightened down all the way on one side but didn't tighten anything down on the other side. So it's best to work your way out because you can actually feel it tightening up these other bolts as you loosen it up. So be careful of what you're doing. Think about it because this pressure, it can break things and this stuff isn't meant to bend. So the same process goes for when you're putting it back on. Pick them up. Just let them roll over. We want to keep our bolts from falling out here. Set these to the side. Pull all the push rods. Ooh, that sucker's bent right there. Look at that. Probably can't tell. I'll roll it on the ground and let you look at it. But that sucker is bent. Bet you that might be your culprit. That one's bent. That one's bent. That one's bent. That one's not. That one's good. That one looks good. And that one looks good. Let's roll these on the floor and I'll show you what they look like. Pretty much all of our push rods are bent in some way. So I'm going to show you one that's not so bent. You can kind of see how it rolls fairly easy. Let me grab one that is very bent. You see that? You can see the curve in the push rod there. See how it doesn't want to roll as easily? Very bent. And pretty much all of them are bent to an extent. Something that's interesting and kind of unique to Chrysler is the fact that these are solid push rods. They do not oil through the push rod like a GM. They actually oil through the head, fills in the rocker shaft, and the rocker shafts will actually fill in the rockers onto the springs. As opposed to a GM one where it actually will fill in through the push rod. See the hole in there? But these are also hollow, which means they like to bend. Chrysler, on the other hand, it's a lot harder to bend one of these push rods unless something is sticking. And you see on the end of it, it's solid, so it does not oil through there. So for bending push rods on this thing, we've got quite a problem. You see, I soaked these suckers. I mean, I had it full. People said that I hydrolocked it, but it never changed. I mean, I had it soaking, and as soon as I put this ATF in it, I still turned it over with spark plugs in it. The spark plug was out, and nothing changed. I mean, I never even stuck the spark plugs in. I never bolted them in. I just had them hand tight. So, I don't know. Remember how I said this engine would have to come apart even if it still ran? Look at this. All this is sitting on top of the cylinder. That is not good. That would have been it could have been a catastrophe. It might have blown it out the exhaust, but I don't know. That's a lot of stuff sitting on top of the cylinder, so that kind of makes me wonder. I wonder if it was actually burning oil and it was running low, so that's why it didn't have any up here. But the cylinder walls, they have surface rust on them, but nothing crazy. There's still kind of some rough spots in there. So this thing is full of sediment on this cylinder at least. This one over here, you can't see it in the camera, but it's pretty rough as well. So it very well could be stuck piston rings. So I brought our cylinder head over here, and I just flipped it over to look at it. Something that I'm noticing though, if you look at our intake valves, look how these are fairly clean. This, I mean, it's got some oil on it, build-up residue, but it's still pretty clean. Pretty clean. And you come to here, this one's got a lot of surface rust on it. So that one could be a problem there. That could have been a problem cylinder, at least on this side, and each exhaust valve is pretty shot. Ooh, there's our ATF. Filled her up. Man, these it's coated. Wow. Cylinder walls all have surface rust on them. They're just junk all in these cylinders. I think it's just a combination of a lot of different things that just allowed for this engine to be terrible basically. Look at all that stuff that would be coming out of this engine. So the rings are probably just, I mean, they're just shot. Look at all this trash I'm getting out of here. I mean, it's bad. See that? All that's sitting in the engine right there on top of the cylinders. They all have surface rust on them, and it's not good. Could this engine run? Absolutely. If we took it apart and, you know, actually looked at it, because that's the thing about it. It's got a ton of surface rust just sitting on the cylinder walls. You can hear that? Listen. That's me scraping the inside of the cylinder wall. That's not good. And ring ridge. It's got the ring ridge. Look at this one. You might be able to see it. You zoom in. Look at that surface rust that's building up on that. So this one was probably stuck open. It's starting to allow moisture get inside the combustion chamber. Alright, here we go. Final test. See if she'll finally turn without anything holding it back for compression. I'm just tightening the bolt. Regardless, should not be like that. The engine is seized. So a lot of you guys were wanting me to figure out what was wrong with it. I'm going to tell you what's wrong with it. It's stuck. It is rusted shut. I mean, there is nothing that is going to make this thing spin without tearing it apart and actually doing some machine work to it. And that's not what I want to do. It is the original engine. I'm not throwing it away. I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm going to keep it, but I'm not going to put it back in the car. If I sell the car, whoever I sell it to can have it, and they can put it back in there. But I don't want to spend a dime on this engine when I've got this sitting over here. This is the 360 I was telling you about, the 40 over with Keith Black Hopper Eutectic pistons. You can see no rust in this one, and it rotates just fine. I've tested it many times. So when I calculate it with the stock compressed head gasket thickness, you get around 9.5 to 1. So if we run a little bit thinner head gasket, we could probably get around 10 to 1. And with a relatively mild cam, maybe a duration around 225 or 230 at 50, we can have really good dynamic compression in this thing. And I think it'll have really strong low and mid range, something that you're going to need when you're going around twisties and corners and turns. And that's what we want to build this thing for. It's not going to be ridiculous. Check out the how far down in the hole this thing is. 0. So that's why I'm not going to waste any more time talking about this 318. Just to reiterate, there you go. Look inside that. See all that rust on the cylinder wall? Same thing over here. I had this thing soaking and soaking. It's even been soaking for another month on top of the original month. So, yeah. There you go. That's it. Farewell, good friend.
And that's going to do it for today's video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this one. Got a lot done today. We got the front suspension and the brakes back on and all bolted in. And I'm not going to brag again, but man, it doesn't look really good. And also we took the original 318, brought it in the shop, tore it down, and found out why it was stuck in the first place. And I'm going to assume that it's going to need a lot of work to come back on the road. And that's not something we won't do one day, but as for right now, 360 is going in the car. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, please leave a like down below. If you have a question for me, feel free to leave a comment. You can also send me an email to the very end of the video. You can send your projects to that same email. Order your t-shirts and your stickers. The It's Straight Besides the Dents t-shirt sale is about to end, and it is a pre-sale, so as soon as we get the certain amount of orders in, we will release those. So make sure you're ordering your t-shirts and get your sticker while you're at it. So I think for next video, I really want to tear into the interior, get apart the trunk, see what we have as far as sheet metal wise, see what's going on, and then we can really dive deep into some metal work, interior work, and make a lot of cool stuff happen. So next week, we're tearing that nasty carpet out. We're gonna make it look good. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. It's about time we get rid of all this. Wow, we've got a lot of work ahead of us.